Hello and welcome to the CBN News YouTube update from Jerusalem. I'm Chris Mitchell. The top leader of Hamas was assassinated in Iran just hours after an Israeli strike killed a high-ranking leader of Hezbollah in Beirut. Iran is blaming Israel for the attack on its soil and is threatening a harsh response. Here's our report. Iran media announced Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran after attending the inauguration of Iran's new president. Reports indicate he was killed in an airstrike at the location where he was staying. Israel has not commented on the reports, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared after the October 7th attack that the leaders of Hamas were dead men walking. The attack carried out inside Iran could ramp up the conflict in the Middle East. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei threatened, "It is our duty to take revenge and severely punish the Zionist entity for the assassination in Iran, because the assassination was carried out on our soil." It's the second major blow against Israel's Iranian-backed enemies on the same day. Earlier, the IDF confirmed it eliminated Fuad Shukr, one of Hezbollah's top leaders in Beirut.
Fuad Shukr was the commander responsible for the Majd al-Shams massacre, in which 12 children were murdered after Hezbollah fired an Iranian Falak 1 rocket.
To see what type of response will Hezbollah provide, where will they fire, which type of weapons will they use, and then of course the second, third and fourth and fifth layer of responses that the IDF has ready to Hezbollah's responses.
The strike came after Hezbollah killed 12 children in a Druze village on the Lebanese border. Conrica says it's important to remember
in uncharted territory, which wasn't part of the strategy. But if cooler heads prevail and if the strategic aims will be pursued, then I don't think that Israel and Hezbollah will be going to a major war.
The question here in Israel is, do they expect something retaliation by Iran, and maybe something similar to what happened on April 13th when Iran launched over 300 missiles and drones at Israel? That is possible, but it seems like Israel is preparing for that. Earlier today, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited the Arrow anti-missile system, perhaps a signal that Israel is prepared for any kind of attack like happened on April 13th. We could see Iran attacking Israelis or Jews in the global arena using proxies. And one former Israeli general told reporters earlier today that it's important that Israel has America's backing, which might give Iran more caution in its response. And in the end, it wasn't an Iranian that was attacked. And as this general said, with all due respect, Iranian won't go to war for the Palestinians. In the New York Times reporting earlier today that Iranian officials are in total shock. What happened in the last 24 hours was incredible intelligence operations by the Mossad, by the IDF. Two foreign, I should say, reportedly by the Mossad, because Israel's not taking any responsibility for what happened in Tehran. But you have two foreign capitals, enemy capitals, precise locations without massive civilian casualties, and following a strike, a major strike against the Houthis in Yemen about 2 weeks ago. Many are asking the question, how big a blow to Hamas is the death of Ismail Haniyeh? It leaves a power vacuum in Hamas, thinning of its ranks. There's 3 of the top 5 leaders have now been eliminated. Most of the fighters in Gaza are dead, wounded, or on the run. Most of its war machine inside Gaza, the tunnels, rockets, ammunition, and weapons have been destroyed. Also, its main supply route, the Philadelphia corridor, has been cut off. So they're really a shell of what they used to be. They still do have the ideology. They have Iranian backing. But this is part of Iran's ring of fire, part of it that has been quenched. Right now, perhaps their main leverage is the 115 Israeli and other nationalities hostages that are inside Gaza. And this will have an impact on the negotiations. Some believe it might likely make it more difficult to reach an agreement and strengthens Yahya Sinwar inside Gaza because Haniyeh and Sinwar were actually rivals in the terror group. Now, this commander in Hezbollah was very influential. General Yaakov Amidror told us earlier today he was not easy to replace. He built up Hezbollah into a military force over decades. He managed Hezbollah's advanced weaponry, including the precision-guided missiles that are so potentially lethal against Israel. Now, how will Hezbollah respond? It's really up to them. Will the situation in the north remain the same? There are some options. They could increase those attacks in the north. They still have a formidable rocket and missile arsenal. Maybe they would strike Tel Aviv, which would really escalate the situation dramatically. They also have a regional network in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. And they also Jonathan Conriquez, thanks for joining us on CBN News. First of all, your reaction to what the IDF apparently has done, a strike on a Hezbollah operative and leader in Beirut.
Still not confirmed officially by the IDF, but it's looking good so far.
Yeah. If this is confirmed by the IDF, what impact will this have on the Hezbollah infrastructure or leadership?
I think it's reasonable to assess that it will have an influence on Hezbollah's ability to conduct operations because there's been what hopefully will be a elimination of a senior operative. Of course, it's not something that will stop Hezbollah from fighting or disrupt its capabilities to fire rockets or drones or anti-tank missiles or to conduct operations in total. But I think that it will be somewhat of a diminishing capabilities. Where I think that we should be looking forward now is to see what type of response will Hezbollah provide, where will they fire, which type of weapons will they use, and then of course the second, third, and fourth, and fifth layer of responses that the IDF has ready to Hezbollah's responses will be according to them.
Yeah. Do you expect that the IDF has more responses from the massacre there on Saturday?
I believe so. My assessment is that Hezbollah will respond to this, and then the IDF already has other targets ready. I assume that the next targets that will be struck stands to reason that they will be more of a permanent nature, so not time-sensitive targets that include personnel, but perhaps infrastructure and facilities belonging to Hezbollah, the more strategic assets, whether it's long-range rockets, precision-guided missiles, drone factories, or bunkers and command posts, so more real estate and less personnel, because obviously now Hezbollah personnel will be scurrying down under earth, hiding themselves below Lebanese civilians, as terrorists usually do, and it'll be more difficult to get to Hezbollah commanders since they are now in hiding.
You mentioned that this missile, this rocket was manufactured in Iran. Talk about how much Iran is behind all of this with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other proxies in the region.
Yeah, you know, I'm in the U.S. now. I just came back from a Christians United for Israel conference. It was amazing. And one of the things that I said there was that as long as Israel doesn't present a strategy and starts to demand a price of the Iranian regime for killing Jews in the Middle East, in Israel, then I don't think that the situation will change, because everything that we see happening since October 7 and many years before that, but greatly so after October the 7th, all of that is related to Iran. There's not a single Israeli enemy within thousands of kilometers or thousands of miles that isn't funded and provided with weapons directly from Iran. If the Iranian regime falls, then the chances of peace and stability in the Middle East, they skyrocket by the power of 100. And as long as the Iranian regime is in power and has the money and weapons to continue to sow violence and instability in the region, then I fear that will be the case. And I hope that the Israeli government will understand the bigger strategic picture here and actually hold the Ayatollahs and the evil Iranian regime accountable for their actions against Israel.
Do you think that would be a game changer if the current government changes its strategy and actually confronts Iran directly?
It would be a game changer, and I hope that it will happen. I have doubts that the current Israeli leadership is capable of doing that with the political situation and the way that they've been managing the war so far. But hope is last to die, and I hope that Israel will do a real reality check here on the situation, and understand that as long as we allow Iran to continue without any responsibility and without any accountability for their actions, then we Israelis will continue to suffer from Iranian aggression. And to be frank and to be clear, I don't expect any other country to do the heavy lifting instead of Israel. This is something that Israel will have to do. Gladly, of course, we would like to have support, U.S. backing and international support and legitimacy to do it, but this is an Israeli mission that will have to be done, and we know how things go. Israel will take action, it will be criticized, but years after, the world will thank Israel, just as it did when Israel struck the Iraqi nuclear reactor in Osirak in 1981, and when Israel took out the Syrian nuclear capabilities in 2007. I'm not insinuating or saying that Israel is going to launch a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, but what I am saying is that there needs to be a strategic shift in the Middle East, and the Iranian regime needs to be held accountable for what they're doing in the region.
After this strike in Beirut and after Saturday's massacre, is it possible, do you think, that this could lead to the major war that many people are expecting between Hezbollah and Israel?
It's definitely possible, but I think that the likelihood is not high, because both Israel and Hezbollah, and of course Hezbollah's masters in Tehran, do not seem interested in opening up such a confrontation, and therefore I think that it is less likely that it will happen.
You're there in the United States, Jonathan. What is your message to many of the people that you've been talking to?
Well, my message is one of fight. And pushing back, of course, doesn't mean physical violence. I mean to adopt a stance and mentality of fighting back against aggressors and not tolerating violence or bullying or anti-Semitism.
Would you say it's safe to say that this is a battle that America is facing as well as Israel?
Not only America, Mitch. It's a battle of the free world, of democracy, of Judeo-Christian values, of law and order, and the respect for the sanctity of human life, and the respect for others. That is what Israel is facing. Like so many times in its past, Israel is simply at the front lines of Western civilization. We are in friction, constant friction with the enemies of Western civilization. And I think the West can thank Israel for being located exactly where it is and for having the fighting spirit to defend itself and, by extension, Western values.
Yeah. Very timely and profound message right now. Jonathan Conricus, thanks so much for joining us on CBN News.
Thank you for having me.
Well, joining us now is Seth Franman. Seth is the author of the upcoming book, The October 7th War, Israel's Battle for Security in Gaza. Seth, the Middle East is wondering what's next, what Hezbollah is going to do. What do you think?
Well, Hezbollah has to be weighing its options right now. It just lost a key commander, so it has to think about whether it wants to provoke Israel more or escalate. Hezbollah has already fired 6,000 rockets at Israel over the last 10 months almost, including anti-tank missiles and precision drones, and it murdered 12 children in the Golan, and it's been killing, people, killing and wounding people almost every week. So, Hezbollah has been kind of dictating the tempo. Now it has suffered a loss, and it has to decide, I guess, whether it wants to kind of do what it calls fulfilling its equation with Israel, where every time Israel does something, it does the opposite, et cetera, or whether it would like to kind of wrap this up with a little bow and say, okay, that tit for tat is kind of over. let's go back to the kind of daily short-range attacks that we've been seeing for 10 months.
Yeah. What do you think? How would
to attack Israel? And in the old days, if Hezbollah had carried out just one rocket attack or killed one person, it would have been a huge conflict. But Hezbollah wants to kind of rewrite the rules of the game and say, okay, we have a right to do this and that, and we have a right to attack deeper and deeper into Israel. And, you know, Israel is also saying that it does not want to escalate to a full-scale war. So you've kind of got two boxers in the ring in which neither one wants to actually, you know, go through the rounds.
That's a great analogy, Seth. I mean, they don't want to knock each other out, I guess, but just keep going.
Aims in Gaza. It wants to complete those aims. And it's not probably in Israel's interest, you know, to jump into a whole other massive conflict in which it is assumed that because Hezbollah has, you know, a lot of rockets and a lot of anti-tank weapons and drones, that, you know, a large part of Israel will be shut down for weeks while this takes. A large part of Israel will be shut down for weeks while this takes place. And Hezbollah has threatened, you know, to target energy infrastructure and water resources and all sorts of things that, you know, people think this would be quite difficult. So it's easier for Israel to kind of keep the tit for tat going. That's probably not good for the average Israeli citizen. It's not good for deterrence in the long term. But not like Iran is a victim here, and it's not like Iran hasn't already done a lot. So the question is, you know, does Iran want to do some sort of symbolic attack to claim that it got its, quote, pride back or whatever? We saw the way Iran responded back in April. Israel killed an Iranian commander in Damascus because it took place in the Iranian consulate or near it. The Iranians saw it as on their soil. So then they launched 350 rockets and missiles at Israel. I don't think they'll do the same thing again, but I think that's entirely plausible. They will want to show that they can do something, you know, and we can imagine the kind of targets that border with Gaza, but also with a lot of the soldiers and fighters and commanders. So it looks like it's a kind of blow-by-blow account of how October 7th unfolded. Then it goes back. It also looks at how did this happen? How did Hamas build up this massive terrorist empire in Gaza? How did it surprise Israel in a kind of 9/11 Pearl Harbor type of attack? And then it also looks at the first 6 months of the war, basically, looking at the new tactics that Israel used in Gaza to kind of grind down Hamas and eliminate Hamas leaders and kind of bring us to the point we are now. So it's a good primer. I think it's an exciting book. I think people will feel the kind of harrowing difficulty that we've all felt in Israel having to go through this trauma, but they'll also hopefully feel a bit of a positive outcome of that because the terrorists have been mostly beaten down and defeated.
Yeah.
With Russia and China and all of our enemies basically to subvert and weaken the West throughout the next 50 years. And so it will be seen as that, I think, October 7th historically, and we have to see if we can kind of roll back and challenge these adversaries and not allow them to commit more of these types of massacres that are harming our way of life.
Yeah, well, that's a great message. And people can read your book, get it on Amazon, I believe, The October 7th War, Israel's Battle for Security in Gaza.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seth. God bless. Well, thanks for joining us, and please join us in prayer for the protection now over Israel after these two strikes. That's promised in Psalm 91. That says in part that he who dwells in the secret place of the Most. It says in part that he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I will trust. By Hezbollah, by Iran, by Hamas, all these enemies that face Israel, not only Israel, but the United States, Western Europe, and all these other places globally around the world. We pray for that extraordinary wisdom right now and your divine protection over this people. And you say that he that watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And we ask this in Jesus' name. So thanks for joining us for our coverage right now on our YouTube, live from Jerusalem. For all of us here in our Jerusalem CBN News Bureau, God bless, and we'll see you.